All right, we're going to get started, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to the November 30th Planning Board meeting for the City of Miami Beach. Hope you watching at home, as well as those in the audience, your families are well and have had an enjoyable Thanksgiving. And we are broadcasting live from our City Hall in our beautiful city of Miami Beach. So happy to be here, happy to see all my board members here. We're missing one, I think. And congratulations to our former planning board member, Alex Fernandez, who is now a sitting city commissioner for the city of Miami Beach. So congratulations to you, Alex, wherever you are. I am pretty sure you are probably watching us because that is the type of person you are, to make sure that you are on top of everything. And we look forward to your service to the city, and I'm sure it will be outstanding. So with that, let me turn it over to our capable attorney, Nick Kalergis, who is always leading us fabulously. And turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a couple of brief announcements before we get started. Today's meeting of the Planning Board will be conducted in a hybrid format with members of the Planning Board physically present in the Commission chambers at Miami Beach City Hall and applicants, staff, and members of the public appearing either in person or virtually via Zoom. To participate virtually, members of the public may dial 1-877-853-5257 and enter the webinar ID, which is 861-4342-6327#, or log into the Zoom app and enter the webinar ID, which again is 861-4342-6327. Anyone wishing to speak on an item must click the raise hand icon in the Zoom app or by dialing *9 if they're participating by phone. Next, I'd like to read the city's notice regarding lobbyist registration. If you're appearing on behalf of a business, a corporation, or another person, you need to register as a lobbyist with the city clerk's office. If you haven't registered yet, you should register before you speak to the board. You don't have to register as a lobbyist if you're speaking only on behalf of yourself and not any other party, or if you're testifying as an expert witness, providing only scientific, technical, or other specialized information or testimony in this public meeting, or if you're appearing as a representative of a neighborhood association without any compensation or reimbursement for your appearance, to express support of or opposition to any item. Expert witnesses and representatives of neighborhood associations shall, prior to appearing, disclose in writing to the city clerk their name, address, and the principal on whose behalf they are communicating. If you're an architect, attorney, or employee representing an applicant or an objector, you must register as a lobbyist. These rules apply whether you're appearing in favor of or against an item, or encouraging or arguing against its passage, defeat, modification, or continuance. And lastly, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to swear in any members of the public and any members of staff who will be providing testimony today. Please raise your right hands. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll give today is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Nick. Let's go ahead and take up the after action item on the minutes. I am just taking another quick look. I don't see anything that needs to be changed. Anybody has any changes to the minutes from last meeting?
No.
Any support for approval?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Alex, you want to call the roll, please?
Yes, I will do the roll. Ms. Bath?
Yes.
Ms. DiPietro?
Yes.
Mr. Brandley?
Yes.
Mr. Jelpi?
Yes.
Mr. Milland?
Yes.
So the motion passes 5-0.
Okay, perfect. So motion passes. Let's take up item number 2, which is Planning Board File 190270, the 1030 Collins Avenue, Fairwinds. This is a progress report, and it's on a request for continuance, correct?
No, actually, Mr. Chair, there are 2 items where the applicant is going to be requesting a continuance. I believe these are items under previously continued items, Planning Board File 21-0446 and Planning Board 20-0452. One is 1825 Collins and the other 1826 Collins, and the other is 800 Lincoln Road. And do you want to hear those requests for continuance now?
Yes. We'll do that.
These are requests for continuance by the applicant.
Good morning, Honorable Chair, board members. James Rao with Green Spoon Mortar, offices at 600 Brickell Avenue, here on behalf of the applicants on the 2 applications Tom had mentioned, 0446 at 800 Lincoln Road and 0452 at 1826 Collins Avenue. Of course, you all have what we refer to as your short board today, and applicants often request continuance in those circumstances. So we're here asking these matters be continued to your December hearing, which is, of course, only in about 3 weeks. And on both of those, we have some things we're still discussing with our clients, the planning staff, and in one instance with neighbors. So we'd like to continue to work on those, come back to in December.
Okay. Does anybody have an objection to the continuance into December? So by unanimous consent of the board, we'll continue these items to December.
Can they do it by one motion for both, or do they need to take a separate motion for each one? Because there's two separate ones.
You're talking about item number 2, or we're talking about?
Items number 3 and 4.
Oh, they should take them separately.
Okay.
Do we have any opposition to continuance of planning board file 210446 to December? No. By unanimous consent, we'll move that one to December. Planning board file 210452. Any objection? Unanimous consent, we'll move that to December. Thank you.
And then, Mr. Chair, I believe there was one other request for a continuance for item number 5. There may be some public comment on number 5, but I'll let the applicant address that.
So Mickey, good morning. I do think it would be a good idea, given the composition of the board and then other factors as well. You're going to have to most likely come back anyhow.
Right.
But go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Mickey Marrero, law firm Burkhardt, Riddell, Fernandez, Larkin, and Tapinas, 200 South Biscayne Boulevard, here on behalf of the Good Time Hotel at 601 Washington Avenue. We have this is a modification revocation hearing. We have a very lengthy and involved presentation for you all, but at the end of that presentation, we will be asking for a continuance because a big part of what we're doing involves work that we're continuing to do with historic preservation staff based on some of their comments to our application for a sound barrier. We met with them on site, and we have very constructive discussions on how to make that better so that we can hopefully get their support. That requires design changes that are undergoing now, so we've continued that application to January 11th. Once approved, it will be, I think, a much more constructive discussion here for a lot of other reasons. Also, we have stopped all the DJ headline events that were the cause of the concern in April and May. So those have been stopped and will continue to be stopped through the time that we get our approval and install the changes. We have installed some of the changes, but the big portion is still coming. So ultimately, our presentation will be there for a continuance request. In light of the fact that there's only 5 of you, I would request it now just for the interest of time, because if we do the entire presentation today, unless you all have 5 votes to change something in our order, which I don't anticipate, then we're going to have to do the entire thing again in January. We're happy to do it, but in light of the fact that there's 5 and we will be requesting that, I think it makes the most sense. So any questions you have for me, happy to answer.
Sure, and I don't think it's just the 5 members. I think we do want to have others who are going to be on the board who may want to weigh in on the subject, especially given the composition of the new commission. I think that's really where I'm coming from, so I want to be clear we can get it done with 5. The addition is we've asked you and your client to do some things from the planning board, and then you also have another board that's overseeing some aspects of what we've asked.
That's correct.
So I do want to give the time for my vote at least, for you to be in compliance with what we've asked and what that other board is asking.
And also, just one other point I failed to mention, we have appealed those violations, and those will be heard in January as well. So it's just a lot of other things at play here. So
No, I understood.
Appreciate that.
Board, anybody have any?
Do we have to hear from the public, or do we have to hear from the public on this?
That's what I was going to ask next, but
Kareem, can
Go
I
ahead,
just
yes.
ask a question?
are you going to sit that far away from me?
Well, I thought you were trying to tell me something. I even showered last week, whether I needed it or not.
Well, at the next break, David isn't here. I feel like you're like the Lone Ranger on that side.
I feel like the Lone Ranger. Can I
Absolutely.
make you a quick question? So you just mentioned that the headline DJ events have been paused until further notice. Did that happen prior to these additional noise violations that are noted?
So there was one violation in your staff report that happened since we were here. A lot of what we're going to get into was specifically that we have appealed it. There was not an event. Frankly, we don't believe that should have been issued. Feel pretty strongly about that. It was just background music, and it was resolved very quickly. But we were in a situation in April and May, Tanya, where there were complaints hour on the hour.
No,
that's not happening.
I'm not worried about the stuff that's already happened in the.
But there was no event. That day was no different than any other day in the last 2 months.
Because my only concern is that we've said, and I have no issue with the continuance, and I agree with what's been said, and it makes sense to make sure everything's being done as properly as possible. But the one thing that we have said every time you guys have come up here is just, put the metaphorical piece of tape on the board and say, the volume cannot go past this level. I don't care if it's a headline event or a ping pong tournament or, somebody just clinking glasses. And that doesn't necessarily seem to be adhered to in the way that we would have expected. And so I cannot urge you strongly enough. I mean, I cannot, without standing on the desk and pounding on it, it just seems so simple, like make your neighbors your friends, stop playing music so loudly, I don't care who it is. And if there is a violation, whether or not you think that it is justified, somebody heard it and called it in. And so just turn the volume down until it's resolved one way or the other. I'm begging.
No, we hear you. And again, that's a big part of the presentation that you will ultimately hear. It has been turned down, and it will continue. And they've heard it loud and clear, and we appreciate it.
No pun intended.
They probably have a job.
They've heard the message.
They probably have a job application for a Goodwill ambassador, right?
Yeah, and there's been, and I can tell you, Tanya, there's been an incredible amount of outreach, and will continue to be that.
Okay.
I want to echo that because it's a little disturbing in the incident report that, they took the manager out, they could hear it, they made a call and turned it down. Just set it to that level. Don't allow it to exceed that level. I don't see what's so complicated about this.
It's just not complicated at all.
All right. So we're doing January. Is that what we're going?
Yes.
Okay. And then, Nick, I do need to open this since we took it to the public, correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is a public hearing item.
Okay. So, Alex, do we have anybody in the audience, just 1 second, do we have anybody online, Alex, waiting with their hand raised to speak on the item?
Yes, I see SL Cal.
Okay. Can we
promote it?
And first, I'd like to swear the individual in. So before you testify, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
They're going to take
1 second. We're going to take the
comments first, and then they'll take members of the public.
Yeah. It's just too hard to go back and forth between the computer. Okay, can we bring the speaker that's waiting online?
They do it back there.
Is the speaker connected?
We have also Jeff.
Oh.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, yes, I've been trying to speak about 1826 Collins Avenue. While we have continuance, they continue to create noise and violate they're having live music and things. So I understand this is their second continuance, but I would stress that they respect their neighbors in the meanwhile.
Understood. Thank you so much. Do we have anybody waiting online to speak on item Planning Board File 160075, 601 Washington Avenue?
I see Jeff Donnelly.
Jeff Donnelly?
Yes.
Mr. Donnelly, do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead, Mr. Donnelly. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me clearly?
Not so much, but let's try to get through it.
Okay, thank you. I just want to call the board's attention to the resolution passed by the Flamingo Park Neighborhood Association that supports the staff report requiring a condition that no audio from Good Time Hotel penetrate past the west side of Washington Avenue. So thank you very much for your attention to this matter. it is important, as one of your members said, actually two said, that it really is important to this neighborhood that the peaceful enjoyment of their properties be maintained in this time period, which of course is in the beginning of the major season for entertainment in the Art Deco district. So thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Do we have anybody else online waiting?
Yes, we have Martha Labar.
Good morning, Marta. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, and I
Thank you.
didn't know that Jeff Donnelly was on, and for brevity, I just emphasize what he said and thank the commission for their comments. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. LeBaire. Anybody else online for this item? Okay, seeing that there are no one else online waiting, we're going to close that portion of the public opportunity to speak, and we have members in the audience here today that would like to speak on the item. Come forward to the podium, please, and state your name, and you'll have 3 minutes, and Nick will swear you in.
I believe I swore you in at the beginning. Were you sworn in at the beginning of the meeting?
I'm sorry, what?
Were you here when he swore everybody in at the beginning of the meeting?
Yes.
Okay, go for it.
Thank you.
State your name and your address for me, please.
730 Pennsylvania Avenue, west of Washington, by the hotel. And I'll make it brief.
And your name?
Chris Santoro.
Thank you.
I just want to add to the comments about the noise levels during this continuance. Yesterday, at around 1 o'clock, the noise happened again. We could hear it inside the apartment. It was loud. So I think that speaks to what you're talking about, which is observing the rules until you all pass judgment on this. It's unfortunate that it's just me here, because I think if everybody who is affected by this intrusion into the enjoyment of their property were here, now it would fill this room and be out to the hallway. So I just want you all to know that this is a very important and substantial issue. And glad to speak on behalf of all those people who can't be here today. Okay?
All right, thank you, Chris, so much. Okay. You hear the company. Okay, I got you. All right. Understood. Okay, seeing no one else from the public to speak on the item in the auditorium here today, we'll close the opportunity for the public to speak, and then I think board members have spoken on it. Is there any? Mark, do you want to?
Yeah, I just want to say, Mickey, you got to be real careful here, because if there's going to be violations between now and the next hearing, it's certainly going to be impactful on what the board decides here. So.
Absolutely, well said. Tanya, you had.
And again, it's Art Basel Week. You know, it's a great week in the city for a lot of reasons. It's a lot of fun. It's very interesting. The temptation is right there. And even when it's not Art Basel Week, we've had people unable to sleep or work or, conduct their business of living in their own homes. And while I think the Good Time Hotel is a fantastic addition to the city and to that neighborhood, and I understand that a huge amount of money has been invested to bring it to where it is now, and more is being invested to try to resolve this issue. I get that, and I respect that. But people have bought these homes with their life savings, and they don't have the opportunity to say, well, it was just a business decision, let's move on to something else. It just seems like David and Goliath here, and I know you guys are making the steps to do what needs to be done, but in the meanwhile, really, no more. We're begging. Thank you.
All right, I think you got your marching orders. All right, thanks. We're going to.
I'll move to continue this to the January planning board meeting.
And for the record, that's January 25th, 2022.
Yep.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mark Milan and seconded by Tanya Bott.
Ms. Bott?
Yes.
Ms. DiPietro?
Yes.
Mr. Brantley?
Yes.
Mr. Jelpi?
Yes.
Mr. Milan?
Yes.
So motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Enjoy a fun and peaceful Art Basel.
You guys too. All right, let's bring up this progress report because I got a little bit twisted in my agenda here. So this is Planning Board File 19-0270, 1000 and 1030 Collins Avenue, Fairwinds Hotel.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'll lead this off. As the board may recall, the conditional use permit for this property, the Fairwind Hotel, was issued in June of 2019. Subsequent to that approval, there was some issues pertaining to their outdoor entertainment. A cure letter was issued, violations were issued, and eventually in November of 2020, the Planning Board approved a modification to the board order to revoke the outdoor entertainment on the rooftop. Recently, there were some violations issued to the property for playing loud music unreasonably loud and excessive, as well as violations of the CUP. These were issued in September and October of this year. A cure letter was subsequently sent to the property owner and the progress report scheduled. In light of the significance of these violations, we are recommending that the matter be discussed and continued to the January 25th, 2022 Planning Board hearing so that we can continue to monitor this business. And if there are no additional violations at that time, there may be an opportunity to suspend any further progress reports. However, if there is a continuation of violations, then we may have to recommend that a modification hearing be considered at that time. I don't know if there's anybody from the public that is on the line or is here to speak on this matter. I don't know if the applicant is here either, but this is something that the board can and should discuss.
Okay, let me make sure I understand. So we took an action in November of 2020, but prior to that action, there are violations that weren't part of the discussion at our action on November 2020.
No, there were the reason that in November of 2020 that the board revoked the rooftop outdoor entertainment was because of previously issued violations.
Got it. So
And
these are repeats.
These are all subsequent to that November 2020 meeting. The violations that we've listed in the staff analysis and the report are the recent violations.
Okay. So.
And that's the reason that we scheduled the progress report for today.
Okay. Yeah, I got it now. So this is a year ago. So all these three here are subsequent to our November 17th action.
Correct.
And so all of these three here are violations of what we took action on in 2020.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understood. Is anyone here on behalf of Fairwinds Hotel?
There's no one online.
No one here represents the Fairwinds.
Jim wasn't there to present.
I think he was only here for the two items, right?
James Rao was only here for the 1826 Collins and the 800 Lincoln Road. I don't believe that he represents the Fairwind, and Mickey Marrero was only here for the good time.
Okay. All right. Do we have anybody from the public that wants to speak on this item? Anybody in the auditorium that wants to speak on the item? Okay, we're going to close the opportunity for the public to speak on the item. Board members, any?
So what do we ask?
I mean, it's a progress report, so we can certainly have discussion on it. I mean, it's hard to do it without the applicant being here. I guess, is that why staff is?
Yeah, we notified the applicant, informed them that this would be set for a progress report, requested their attendance. They elected not to come. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't provide further direction or continue the progress report, and if the progress report is continued and there are additional violations, you could certainly at that point potentially set a modification revocation hearing. The applicant does not have to be in attendance for that to happen.
Is this the one that they were here in front of us quite a few times before?
Yes.
And they always transgressed and then apologized and transgressed and apologized?
But we've had a few of those.
But I think it's this one, right?
This was one of those, and eventually the board revoked the rooftop entertainment component because of their transgressions.
Right.
I mean, how different are these violations? So I see that In some cases, they cite different sections of the code, but ultimately, you have one on September 30th of this year that cites violation of the rooftop area. Then you have one on, let's say, October 13th of this year, which doesn't specify the rooftop, but references the same sections of the code, and it just says violation of noise ordinance. So is there any kind of...
The two violations that were issued on September 30th are interrelated because one is a violation of the noise ordinance, and then the second is a violation of the CUP. The third violation noted, which was issued on October 8th, is a separate noise violation that was issued, and then the fourth one on October 13th was another violation of the CUP that was interrelated to the one issued on October 8th. So there were two separate transgressions, one on September 30th and then another one identified on October 8th.
Okay, so I'm to take the two that were direct violations of CUP. Those are kind of distinct and different violations than the ones that are just noise ordinances.
Correct.
Would that be correct?
I mean, a noise violation is still a violation of the CUP, but they, code compliance issued two separate violations.
Okay.
And just currently, they are not permitted to have music on the roof.
Correct. Well, they're not allowed to have music on the roof that exceeds ambient levels. So you can't hear the music downstairs. If they're playing music where you can hear it downstairs, that would run afoul of the CUP.
And all of the noise violations are related to music that is being played on the roof? But historically, even before this?
Correct.
And so the next step could be to revoke that portion of their CUP?
The next step would be to revoke the remainder of the CUP, which allows entertainment in other areas of the venue, in the downstairs
But the venue is not causing a ruckus with the entertainment and music from other areas, right? It's all stemming from the roof?
Correct.
So would it not make sense then? And, I'm a little... as my grandmother would say, a little fatutzt about the fact that nobody thought that it was necessary to come have a conversation. I think it's wildly disrespectful of the process and of doing business in the city of Miami Beach.
Tanya, that's what I asked about, because this is the same people that kept on showing back and I'm sorry, and then violating, and violating.
And the better to beg forgiveness than ask permission model of doing business is something that we really cannot and should not tolerate here in Miami Beach. So I would be of the mind, I'm not sure what the process for this is, but to say, if you're operating your business in such a manner...
I'll help you. We need to set a revocation here.
Yeah, like if your business indoors is fine and nobody has an issue with that, keep on doing that, but your days of having rooftop music at any level are over. So whatever the proper language for that is, I'm making that motion.
Sounds like you want a revocation hearing.
If you want to set a revocation or modification hearing, you can go ahead and do that. The earliest that we could set that revocation hearing would be in January, because we don't have enough time to do a 30-day notice for the December 21st meeting. But we could bring it back in January as a revocation modification hearing.
Because prior to that, the only remedy we have is making additional modifications to the CUP today. Right. So it's
I think we said it. And maybe with enough notice, they can find time in their calendars to join us for the conversation.
I'm supportive of that, Tanya. I mean, these people have been thumbing their nose at the city for a while.
Yeah, and it just is bad for business as a city where people who are doing the right thing never get called out for having done the right thing, yet people who do the wrong thing repeatedly get yet another chance. And I think we need to shut that nonsense down.
So the floor is yours.
I make a motion to shut that nonsense down.
All right, so it's been moved that we set a revocation hearing for the January 20...
I'm sorry, is it a revocation/modification hearing?
Yes.
That's right.
I apologize, you're correct. for a revocation modification hearing on January 25th of 2022 for Planning Board File 190270, the Fairwinds Hotel. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, it's been moved moved by Tanya Bott, seconded by Mark Milan for the revocation modification hearing for the item.
All right, and I'll do a roll call. Ms. Bag,
Yes.
Ms. DiPietro,
Yes.
Mr. Brandley,
Yes.
Mr. Jelpi,
Yes.
Mr. Milan.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right. Let's now bring up Planning Board File 210457, 1671 Collins Avenue. Tom?
Okay, I'll make a very brief introduction, and I know the applicant will have a presentation for this. In the report, our recommendation was continuance of the application to the December 21, 2022 meeting. And the reason that we had made that recommendation in the report is due to the fact that there were some insufficiencies with regard to their traffic and circulation study, in particular with regard to the intersection of Lincoln Road and Collins Avenue. Since their submission, however, their traffic consultant has put together a plan that our internal traffic circulation people from the Transportation Department have looked at. I believe they're on the line and they can speak to it. And my understanding is that they have addressed all of the issues that they had identified. We have also recommended a number of conditions to address some deficiencies in their sound study identified by our peer reviewer. Those are part of the draft order. And then lastly, the only thing I want to note is that there was a small typo in the draft CUP, and I want to make the following correction on the record in the draft final order. This is condition number 2.A .6 V1 paren D, and it should read, sound from the entertainment establishment shall not be plainly audible from the western right-of-way line of Collins Avenue and from the northern right-of-way line of Lincoln Road. And I've deleted eastern property lines of the subject property. So with that one change, we would recommend that the draft order be adopted with the remainder of the conditions. I think are our people from transportation on the line? Just in case the board members have any questions. Which one? The reason we made that change is because it was a typo, and the eastern property line of the subject property is basically the Atlantic Ocean. And so the sound, sure, the sound won't be plainly audible east of that. What we want it to be is not plainly audible to the west.
Is Firat online? I think I spoke to him.
Wait, what is? Let's let the applicant speak first.
Yeah, we can go ahead and let the applicant make the presentation, and then we can reach out to transportation to see if they could go ahead and log in just in case.
Oh, we were waiting on transportation. Yeah, we were waiting on transportation.
Yeah, but you can, I think the applicant can go ahead and make the presentation, and then we'll reach out to transportation and see if we can get our transportation person to log in just in case there's any questions.
Got it. Okay. Go ahead. You have the floor, sir.
Good morning. For the record,
10 minutes.
Yes, sir. Good morning. For the record, I'm Fredo Gonzalez, Office of 333 Avenue America with Greenberg Traurig, on behalf of EBJ Sagamore LLC, the applicant. We do have I have it with me from ownership today, Javier Grande, who's here in the audience, and then I have our consultants from Sound, Transportation, and Management also on Zoom if needed. I'd like to do if we could put up the presentation, I'll jump quickly and give you a quick overview, and so it could be under 10 minutes. No, that's not me. That's nice. I'm losing time. I'm not gonna make it.
We'll give you another
go over the other issues if you want. So, oh, it's coming. Okay. There we go. Next page, please. The CUP's request is for the Sagamore, what's known as the Sagamore Hotel property. Next page, please. So I'm just giving you an overview there. It's right next to the Ritz-Carlton, the National Delano, on the east side, and retail on the west side. Next page, please. Here's the Sagamore Hotel. It's a little, some images. Next page. This is the area where we're requesting CUP, which is the pool area in the rear of the Sagamore Hotel. Next page. Currently, okay. Here is the area that we're asking for to have the reason would trigger the CUP. Inside the property, there has been a restaurant and a bar that's been there historically. That had total seats of about 142 with 201 people. That had not triggered the CUP. Now we wanted to add a venue on the outside in the rear. Many of you may have been at events over the years. This weekend is the famous Sagamore Art Basel brunch that goes on that actually hosts well over 1,000 individuals. And it's always been the mecca for arts since Art Basel started. And what the hotel wanted to do was be able to have events on a regular basis that are in tune with their the culture and the arts that they keep displaying on site. And instead of having to go for a special event every so often, the CUP would serve that purpose. Next page, please. And then that's the seating layout of the eastern portion of the outdoor. Next page, please. And then the pool area that faces the ocean. Next page. So I just wanted to give a quick overview. The issue why staff, and they mentioned about the continuance, was the original traffic analysis that was done showed all the cars are being parked, and you'll see what's in green is the Sagamore, lavender, purple, whatever color you like. That one is the Decoplage, where originally all the cars were valeted and parked. The traffic analysis showed that when they returned cars to Sagamore, there was a potential for backup on Lincoln Road and Collins Avenue in the dead-end portion of the street going westbound. We didn't think that would be a major concern, since the only ones impacted would be the Ritz-Carlton, which are our partners, and the Decoplage, which are actually renting the parking spaces for this project. But nonetheless, we discussed with traffic, and by taking about 50% of the cars that would park in the Decoplage and move them to 1501 Collins, which is in orange, it eliminates that condition. So that was why we had to do an amended traffic study showing the shift, and you've heard from staff that now it doesn't create a negative traffic issue. So if we could actually bring down the presentation at this point, unless you have any questions. So what we're asking for is to operate from 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. In the outdoor area, up to a maximum of 292 seats with an occupant load of a maximum of 482. And it's a large space that could probably hold more if we wanted to, but this is where we wanted to configure in a way where it was manageable. We would have a DJ, where we propose various locations depending on the type of event, and a lot of the events that they're having, they've had through special events and hotel events, really circle around arts, crafts. So we didn't think this would be a problematic CUP. We also, since we are partnered with the Ritz-Carlton next door, immediately next door with 354 rooms, we can't have it. We have our own hotel guests. We have about 101 hotel rooms. We can't have events that would be too loud. It would disturb us before it would even get to the part of creating a disturbance to any of the neighbors and abutting properties. And with that, I'm happy to answer any question the board may have.
Do we have our traffic department available first?
Yes, I see Firat on the list. So,
Hi, Farad. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Josiel, do you so swear?
I do.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Josiel.
So, yeah. So we just wanted to reiterate our initial concern had been as the attorney for the developer for the Sagamore has stated. Our initial concern was upon returning of the vehicles to the Sagamore. While the intersection itself did not fail, the movement coming out of the Decoplage and the Ritz-Carlton into the intersection of Collins Avenue and Lincoln Road was going to experience some heavy failures. So that was a big concern for us because while the Decoplage is parking the vehicles and the Ritz-Carlton are partners, this would affect some residents that do live in the Decoplage and other areas. But we have worked out, we have worked with the traffic engineer for the Sagamore to add that additional location, which has offset the impact. And at this point, based on the supplemental information that we have received, we are recommending approval of this application.
Any questions for Josiel before we let him?
I have a question.
Absolutely.
So this is not challenging anything. It's just trying to understand it because it's a little bit new to me. So I understand that the goal is to spread the impact by going to 2 different parking venues. But to me, as somebody who drives up and down that street, it would seem that the issue would be less coming in and out of the parking venues and more when the cars are being delivered to the patrons waiting for them. So how does that redistribution of parking at the parking facilities ameliorate the concern of the backup of dropping the cars off?
Well, we've already proposed sufficient valet in operation, so there would not be any backup issue. That was not, and the updated analysis also shows that we don't have any queuing into Collins Avenue, which I know would become a major problem. If at any point there was a problem, we would work with. We also have. We could always work with the Ritz-Carlton to try to shift some of the pickups there if that was needed. We don't foresee it as the traffic analysis shows what could potentially be the worst case. We think it's a conservative report, so we actually think we're going to have need less valet than what we're proposing to have.
So, Josiel, while I have you, just to make sure I understand this clearly, so the issue that you saw in the traffic report prior to the modifications of the traffic report were related to the street that intersected with Collins Avenue from the Decoplage. So that's where you were getting this bottleneck or the issue that needed to be corrected. You did not find the issue with the queuing at the driveway of the drop-off and pickup point. Is that correct?
That is correct. That was never the issue. As a matter of fact, we worked out with them so that they could have sufficient valet staff in order to process the vehicles. So that was never a concern. The concern was on the return trip, and particularly the movement, the westbound movement at the intersection of Collins Avenue and Lincoln Road. Just to address a little bit more of the issue from the Madam Member or the concern. And I think, with answering this question, you may be a little bit more clear on it. As we look at these valet analysis, we don't only look at the impact to the valet location or the impact to a particular intersection, but we look at the corridor in general. So in the supplemental analysis, we've been able to take a look at the impacts to the intersections as well. And that has essentially ameliorated our concern and addressed our concern, because now no intersections would fail because the impact has been the minor impact has been spread. I also, want to give a little bit more information on how these analyses are conducted. And the way that we do this for such a special venue like this one, what we did is we worked with the traffic engineer to do this analysis similar to what we would have done or what we did for the ballroom at the convention center. So we looked at the worst case scenario, and even under those concerns with this new analysis, this was addressed in their traffic study. The actual Sagamore driveway and the processing of vehicles, I just want to reiterate, that was never a concern because they had provided sufficient, not only was there sufficient queuing space, but they had provided sufficient staff to process the vehicles.
Okay, thank you. Did that answer? Okay.
Thank you.
Did you have a statement?
I just wanted to agree with the amendment. We have no proposed amendments to the proposed staff report. That correction that Tom made earlier, we're fine with.
Okay. Do we have anybody wanting to speak on this item?
No, I don't see anyone else.
Yes, we have one. Good morning. Just state your name and your address, and then you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning. Rachel Streitfeld. My law firm is Brightside Legal, 1455 North Treasure Drive. I'm here on behalf of the Decoplage Association. And this is sort of a fire drill. They sent me here as of this morning. I registered as a lobbyist. They have serious concerns about the traffic and the noise. We have not spoken with the applicant, but when I hear that there's not going to be a concern with the queuing, I mean, I've driven down Collins Avenue past Sagamore during Art Basel weekend, and there are cars lined up on that ramp. It's not big enough. You've got traffic back up on Collins Avenue. The traffic report did say there are concerns about a failure. We have not had time to read the revised report and pick it apart. And so we are actually asking for a continuance this morning so that we can review that revised traffic report and address it on December 21st. They're also concerned about the noise. The acoustic study that was conducted addresses indoor. There are references to the skylight and to the glass walls. There are also inconsistent or incomplete measurements, but this is an open-air, outdoor entertainment establishment that they're talking about here. So the residents at the Decoplage are concerned that there's going to be DJs and loud music until 2 o'clock in the morning that are going to disturb their quiet enjoyment of the property. So because of the references to the failed intersection at Lincoln, and because of those noise concerns, we are respectfully requesting, out of, again, respect for the neighbors at Decoplage, a continuance to December 21st so that we can speak with the applicant so that we could review the revised traffic study. Thank you.
Thank you. Alfredo, I guess both of you can stay there. You said that the parking is at the Decoplage, right?
Yes.
So I imagine you pay the Decoplage for the ability to park in the. Is that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So.
All right. I'm a little fuzzy sometimes. Just trying to get clarity.
We have an agreement to park the cars there. We're now going to be parking half the cars that originally were going to be parked there. So we shifted elsewhere on the traffic analysis potential impact. We'd like to. We're happy to work with, and we have to come back in a proxy report. I will say this about the Decoplage. We've been trying to get together with the Decoplage for several months now because we have a much larger application before the HPB coming in December for the redevelopment of the Ritz-Carlton, the Sagamore site.
I'm going there next. I saw that on page 6 of 8, but go ahead.
Okay. Which is coming, we're actually before the HPB. The intent was to have this conditional use operate until we are ready to pull permits and start construction to facilitate having the events that they do have at the Sagamore. I would also note that staff's request to add the additional condition where the noise to the south, that actually exceeds the standard of the county on audible noise. So it's a stricter standard. So the intent is not to create a problem to the Decoplage or anyone. And they have events there historically. I've been having, like I said, this week they have a series of events. They went and got a special event permit because obviously they don't have a CUP. And they do operate on many a time till 2 a.m. for hotel events, as they have a right to do today. And we don't have a series of problems. We have to deal with the hotel residents at the buffer, which is the Ritz-Carlton. That's where most of the noise would go, and we have to protect it doesn't get to that point, because then the hotel guests would complain well before you cross the street and maybe have an impact on the Decoplage. But what I would request, if we could approve it today, and we're coming back in 60 days, and we're hopefully going to meet with the Decoplage we could talk about this, and hopefully the other project that we've been pending for a couple months to try to meet.
Got it. Anybody else from the audience that wants to speak on the item? Okay.
May I just say one more thing?
Yeah, one second.
Sure.
Anybody else want to speak on the item? Okay, so we're going to close the opportunity for the public to speak on the item. Absolutely. Following your comments.
Thank you. This is just my last point. The occupancy load, as stated in the order, is 528 on the outdoor patio. That's not including the guests at the hotel. 528 people. That's Ubers, that's Lyfts, that's valet. That is a lot of cars coming into the Sagamore. Now, the annual art brunch is a beautiful event, and I enjoy it every year. But to have this on a regular basis is a significant concern to the residents. So we would greatly appreciate the opportunity to look at that report, do our due diligence. We will be meeting with the applicant on the HPV matter as well as this, and that would be really appreciated from you all this morning.
No problem. Thank you very much for your comments. Tom, can somebody explain to me the part about the tower, and it says, or maybe Alfredo, the applicant has indicated that they plan to abandon this proposed CUP once construction permits. How does that work if we were to give an approval relative to the new building? Does the new building come back before us? Does it come back with different permissions, and that's why they can
The new
abandon?
building is not required to come back to this board, only the Historic Preservation Board. The applicant, I believe, and I'll let the applicant go into more detail, but I believe their plan is to abandon this use once the construction of the tower starts in earnest and once they finish it. To the extent that they want to abandon a CUP, they would just send us something in writing, saying that they would abandon it. I don't think that they want to put that as a condition, either a sunset or an abandonment, but I believe that that's what their intention is, but I'll let the applicant speak to that more directly.
Absolutely.
Sure, and I can answer that, Mr. Chair. So we are asking for the CUP for what is now just a Sagamore property. At the Ritz-Carlton hotel site that sits there today, their uses will exceed what is required for a CUP, but they're grandfathered. They're one of those few sites on the beach that predate the conditional use process. So they have multiple restaurants and bars. What the intent is that once we get an approval from the HPB, will it be in December, if they have questions in the next couple months, get an approval, then we can move to construction drawings to then move to the permit process. Once the permit is issued, the proposal is to have a residential tower that is over the demolition of the cabanas that exist today at the Sagamore that were built in the 90s, have those demolished. So the Sagamore will shut down to be totally renovated. The Ritz-Carlton side will continue to operate as a hotel in most of the site. So at that point, we won't be having any events at the Sagamore. And it'll go about a 2-year construction process where there'll be a cantilever building that kind of starts off on the Sagamore site and cantilevers over the Ritz-Carlton towards the south. At that point, once we have all the programming, and then it'll become part of the Ritz-Carlton. So there'll be about 60 suites added to the historic Sagamore site hotel building. So that'll be under the flag of the Ritz-Carlton. And then you'll have about 50 residential units in the proposed tower. So once the complex is unified, and we have to still work it out with staff, whether at that point, what may or may not trigger requiring a CUP. Obviously, the intent of the area we're in question today, we're asking for this CUP, is where the tower is going to be located, and especially the residential tower is going to be located. So the intent is not going to be having these types of events at that underneath a residential tower, which will be even closer than the hotels at the Ritz. So it is almost an interim, but we may need to morph in this CUP eventually to whatever the city determines based on the unified site and all the uses, how that plays, what's grandfathered, what's not grandfathered. So I hope I didn't confuse you more.
No, and I was just trying to, I mean, we deal with, height issues on towers. We deal with, obviously CUPs, entertainment, noise. So I'm glad that you gave the clarity on it, because what will happen to us later downstream is then if we're not paying attention to this thing, then something else comes up and we're like, wait, that's related to the other thing that we did 2 or 3 months ago. And I mean, you like to think, at least for me, that you remember everything, but you don't remember all the details until it comes back, and then you're like, oh, that was plugged into this other thing. And then we'll look down the road, and then somebody's saying, well, my tower shadows over this tower, and then we thought one tower was going to be built, and now there's 4 towers that are going to be built in the area. And if we knew all this stuff going in, it presents a different mindset for the board. So I'm just trying to get my head around it. Any other comments on it? Or?
I have questions.
Yes, please.
I always have questions.
Absolutely.
The plan is to have an occupancy load of 528 people?
The maximum would be 500.
And what is it currently when you pull a special event permit?
We have had that number and greater.
And how many special events do you run currently per year? Approximately.
I know there's several they do a year. Obviously, during Art Basel, they have in major use weekends. The hotel's kind of been ramping up since kind of getting back to a normal operation after COVID, and we're still kind of dealing with that. So I don't have an exact number.
Ballpark, is it 5, 50, 500?
Oh, no. Well, there's a limit under the code on special events. You could have, on the official major use weekends, hotels could apply for that, and then they could apply for 5 more times a year. So, and that's for events open to the public. That doesn't count hotel events, which every hotel has a right to do, having a wedding, a cocktail party. That's a private event. That's not advertised, that type. So, and the hotel does have several of those throughout the year. They've actually, since we started this process, they've rented out the hotel more than once. The entire hotel was rented out for an event convention. So it was limited only to those at the property. It was a private hotel event, and they had a series of events outside, inside, for the entire weekend.
So, not including private events, it's high-impact weekends plus an additional 5.
Correct.
And under this CUP, you would be able to do public events outdoors potentially every night of the week, every week of the year.
Potentially, yes.
So, and that's a pretty significant change. That's a lot more of an impact. I'm less worried about traffic if Josiel says that that's been mitigated than I am about the impact on the neighboring building. And I find it surprising that there is an agreement made between the Decoplage and the Sagamore in terms of how to park the cars, but there hasn't yet been outreach to the residents of the Decoplage. And so if I were living in the Decoplage, I would want to have had that conversation as well. So I would be of the mind to give them time to have that conversation before anything is done.
And Madam Board Member, just wanted to be clear, we have contacted them for months, and I have been exchanging emails with, an attorney, a different attorney within our office and we're hopefully going to have a meeting soon. I have been contacted individually by different unit owners, and every time they contacted me, I say, well, I'm talking to some of your board members and your attorney, and I rope them into the email. So we have, it's not that we have not tried to talk to them. We have tried for several months. And we're glad to talk whenever we could, and they provide us a date. I can't force them to meet with us.
I just wanted to illuminate the issue of communication with the Decoplage. The condominium association is represented by the Jacobs Law Group. I'm a specialty outside zoning attorney that they retained for this purpose. As far as reaching out to speak to the Decoplage about the HPB application, the association has been dealing with its residents and its own board politics internally to figure out what it wants to do vis-a-vis the new proposed residential tower at the Ritz Sagamore Unified Site. This CUP application kind of sprung up as a surprise to the Decoplage Association, at least that's my understanding. So they reached out to me to be here this morning. So these are sort of two separate issues. Again, as far as the HPB application, they are going to be meeting with the developer applicant, and I think you have been corresponding with Russell Jacobs about that. So that meeting is impending. Hopefully they'll be able to do it next week. But again, this CUP is separate and apart.
Any other questions from the board? No? No? Anything else? Yes, Alex, we have. I don't want to open the public opportunity to speak again. I have a feeling this is going to get extended. Did you want to move an item on this?
I would prefer to postpone any decision for a month, giving everybody the chance to specifically put together a meeting just on this, not looping it into the bigger project, which is going to be thorny, and I'm sure that's going to have a lot of discussion around it. This should be a fairly direct conversation about what are your plans to mitigate noise and any other concerns residents might have, your group's opportunity to address those concerns. You never know when something that nobody could have foreseen will be brought to the discussion, and I think that's really important to have that happen before things get codified rather than after trying to fix them. So, it's 3 weeks from now. I would suggest we postpone it till then.
All right, so 1 second. There's a motion on the floor. It's been moved that this item be continued to the December 21st, 2021 meeting of the Planning Board.
I'll second it.
All right, it's been moved by Board Member Bott and seconded by Board Member DiPietro to move this item to December 21st of 2021. Any unreadiness on the board? All right, let's call it.
And I'll do a roll call. Ms. Bath?
Yes.
Ms. DiPietro?
Yes.
Mr. Brandley?
Yes.
Mr. Jelpi?
Yes.
Mr. Milan?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
I was just going to suggest that we support the continuance.
Okay, perfect.
That's all I wanted to say. I had talked to my client, and it was fine. If we move it to, so we moved it to the December 20 what?
21st.
21st. Okay.
From today.
Perfect.
No, look, I think it's going to be a fantastic overall vision, but certainly, to have the Decoplage here and say that they need more conversation, I think is to your benefit.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. All right, we're going to take up our last item for the day, which is Planning Board file.
Sure you have to do lunch?
Should we? I had a request to do lunch, like we should stop right now.
I was just telling Alejandro that I don't even think we need to order lunch at this point.
Oh, no, we did not say that, sir.
Oh, okay. All right.
How about brunch?
We do this job for the lunch.
Okay.
Yeah,
if you want to wait,
that is our payment, the lunch.
If you want to wait for the lunch, we can wait for the lunch.
The bottle of water, that is what I am waiting on. All right, we're going to take up our last item for the day, Planning Board File 210474, which is a code amendment for height limits on office uses. Good to see you, sir.
Hello, Mr.
Happy
Chairman.
holidays to you.
Happy holidays.
Let's turn over to staff.
I can go ahead and start, Mr. Chair. This is actually a pretty simple modification to the CPS2 development regulations. Currently, under the code, in the CPS2 district, the maximum building height is 50 feet. However, properties that are west of Lenox Avenue have a maximum building height of 75 feet, regardless of what the use is. Additionally, for all properties in the CPS2 district that consist of hotel or residential development, the maximum building height is 75 feet. But properties that are east of Lenox Avenue that consist solely of commercial or office are limited to 50 feet. The proposal here would create a limited exception to that to allow for unified development sites that are on the south side of 5th Street, located between Jefferson and Michigan Avenue, to go up to 75 feet for solely office. This was discussed at the Land Use Committee and endorsed by the Land Use Committee, referred by the Planning Board. Staff is supportive of this proposal, and we would recommend that the board transmit to the City Commission with a favorable recommendation. And just as a point of notification, we have placed this on the December 8th City Commission agenda a week from tomorrow for first reading, and I will update the City Commission at the meeting on whatever your recommendation is today.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. So good morning, Mr. Chairman, Board Member Staff, Michael Larkin, 200 South Biscayne Boulevard.
And Michael, we'll give you 8 minutes.
Okay. Here is on the applicant. As staff indicated, we are seeking an amendment to the code to allow office uses like that shown here at 75 feet in height. Staff is in support of this legislation, as is the commission. Can we pull up the presentation, please? Next slide. So here we have a great partnership that's come together with two seasoned developers, Sumata and Corona, and Busy and Partners, along with our design architect, Alberto Baeza from Madrid, and Coop 3, our local architects. And also assisted by my partner, Matthew Amster, and my partner, Jeffrey Burkow. Next slide. Our project is 3 lots located at the southeast corner of Michigan Avenue and 5th Street in the CPS2 zoning district. Next slide. Since I don't have my glasses on, I can barely see, but I'm going to go ahead and give it my best. So the lime green is area that indicates the area in this corridor where 75 feet is permitted for hotel and residential already. If you look at the orange to the west of us, that's Lenox Avenue, and to the west of that, 75 feet is allowed for all uses. What staff is proposing is a little bit more expansive than what we proposed, and but we're fine with it. It's in teal. Our proposal is to allow office use to be 75 feet. Staff is saying 75 feet west of Jefferson Avenue, and we accept that modification to our original boundaries, which were more narrow than that. Next slide, please. Although there's a lot of language on this slide, what it boils down to is that the number one reason that you want to increase the height here from 50 to 75 feet is to have a much better floor-to-ceiling height that definitely attracts a Class A office space. And in this 5th Street corridor, this is the ideal location. There are already office uses populating this corridor, particularly on the south side, starting with the China Grill building, then working your way to the WeWork building, then there's a building directly west of us. So this is an ideal location for office use in our city. At 50 feet maximum height, that only caters to Class B or Class C offices. And the similar efforts for office use have been in other commercial areas of the city. You all know about Terminal Island, Sunset Harbor, and Alton Road, where the height has been increased to 75 feet in those neighborhoods in the last few months. Next slide, please. These are some examples that this joint development team have done. The first is from Sumata and Corona. These are projects they have done up in New York City. Next slide, please. This is from Busy Partners. As you see, they have a diverse amount of work. On the right-hand side, more rehabilitation to brand new construction. So these development partners are coming to you all with a world of experience between them. Next slide, please. This is our design architect, Alberto Baeza. He has rose to prominence in Spain, particularly in Madrid, but he has worked throughout the world, and he is our design architect here. Next slide. This is just some examples of his work. There's one single-family home, as you see, in New York State, and then other much larger, more civic institutional use buildings in Spain. Next slide, please. So the teal indicates the project location. As you can see, the corridor already has a number of tall buildings, and this will fit in seamlessly, whether you're talking about the bayfront condo buildings or where Target and Publix are located, or where you see just to the west of us, there are 2 office buildings of just about substantially similar height to our office building. Next slide, please. Another great benefit of this particular project that we are preserving a historic 2-story building. Today, the building's at the south end of the site and is in the middle of the lot, pretty much closer to the alley and not really prominent. We are proposing to relocate this historic building to Michigan Avenue. At the front of the project, we'll showcase this as a part of the city's history and activate it with either a retail or a small cafe, such as a juice bar, for the enjoyment of the neighborhood. Next slide. What you see there is it shows the current location. As you can see, is kind of embedded into the rear of the property. What you also see is that a prior development approval, the owners took advantage of it, but then midway through construction, the project failed. So we are hoping to take advantage of the foundation work and build on top of that, and that will be our subterranean parking garage. But they didn't touch the historic building. They were leaving it there, but we thought it would be more appropriate to bring that historic building up to the front of the property. Next slide, please. These are just some of the examples. You know, you don't have to be a grand building to have some interesting historic details, and this building does, and these details will be highlighted and refurbished in conjunction with the construction of our new office building. Next slide. So these are just descriptions of the 2 different development approvals that have gone forward, but then you obtain the approvals, but then for whatever reason, these projects never get built. So just to remind you all that, you know, sometimes the best projects don't get built, and thankfully these did not get built, because now we have a much better project before you all with this beautifully designed office building and a much better treatment of the historic building. Next slide, please. So what I'd like to do now is invite up Alon from Cube 3. He is going to walk you through the next set of slides and discuss the design of the building. Go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. I don't want to take up too much time so you guys can get lunch.
Good morning.
So, you know, as sort of the shepherds for the design here, working with Alberto Baezo, what was important to us to translate to him and exciting about the project for us was urbanistically, how can we improve the conditions of what was previously proposed and our current proposal, also fit in with the neighborhood and pay respect to the contributing property. So as we moved through the project, if you can go to the next slide, please, you can see that what we wanted to do in one back, please, what we wanted to do to sort of not only pay homage to the historic building, which you see with bougainvillea on top of it, but understand, you know, how we best treat the site is move that office building up to the northwest as far as possible. That sort of helps control the scale as you're moving south into the neighborhood. What was exciting for us as well with having the contributing property and having the existing foundation was this opportunity to have adaptive reuse within the property and really environmentally focus on the best way that we could adapt this new office building to the existing foundation without having to dig underground more, extending the basement and the footing, have a minimal impact, tie it into the existing foundation, and also bring the contributing property into you know, a protected elevation at NGVD 9 that matches with the existing podium of the site. So there's a relationship between elevating the historic building, our podium that wraps around the project, and contextually, you know, pushing that building as far to the north as possible. We have 10-foot wraparound balconies on every part of the building. We really wanted this building to feel like it belongs in Miami Beach. And one of the things that does is lightens the building up. While we're pressed on the corner, the actual envelope of the building is set 10 feet back from every corner of the building. That allows for passive energy systems, that we have sliders and doors around every facade. And that's really seen as an outdoor workspace. So it's continual flow from indoor to outdoor. We have covered terraces. We have a covered piazza on the ground floor. Next slide, please. As you can see with this image in the night shot, what we also wanted to do was to help relieve traffic, was to bring a private drive that sort of on the urban grid matches what's happening across the street with the curb cut into the parking garage. That's going to be able to help us pull traffic off of the street into our property, provide a valet service with car stacker structure that's behind the historic home. The contributing home is being lifted and moved onto Michigan so we can feature it with a really lush landscape plaza in front. And again, as Michael mentioned, this is going to be used as sort of a cafe. This is going to be an amenity for the neighborhood and for the office building.
We'll give you about one more minute.
Sure. We also tried to sort of contrast architecturally, having a void on the ground floor space that allowed that building to breathe. There's even a gesture that southern balcony that's closest to the historic house actually gets pulled back further than the other balconies, almost framing that historic home and allowing it to be, again, for us it was a feature. It wasn't an obstacle. So we really wanted to feature and highlight this building in any way we can. Next slide, please. Again, another look, we have a lot of renderings of this building because it's really important to us. So how we're going to introduce landscaping, make it really feel like it belongs in Miami Beach and South Beach, tropical nature to it, bougainvillea growing, providing that plaza for the people out, for the public out in the front, and then again, having this be another instance of adaptive reuse on the project where we can use this as a cafe and again, bring it to the forefront of the street. Next slide, please. And this is a view from Fifth Street looking down at the alley. So again, the architecture has this purity to its design. It wraps around the whole structure, very clean lines, very refined, detailed edges, clean glass, very elegant stone that wraps around the podium, and then added landscape to bring lushness to the building and to sort of the edges of the building in an urban condition.
And that's the last slide.
That's the last slide. Just looking from Fifth, just looking south. The other elements is bougainvillea on the rooftop and sort of on the podium level, adding the landscape. Again, we want this to be a really innate building that belongs in South Beach and belongs in Florida.
So thank you, Alon. Mr. Chairman, that wraps up our presentation. We're all available for your questions.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Maybe a quick question to Elon. I noticed there's a guardrail on the roof. Is there a roof deck
in
the building? And what's the idea for the roof deck?
It's just going to be open up to the tenants. It's not going to be a commercial rooftop in South of Fifth. That's pointless anyways because of the early closing time for rooftop. So it'll just be it could be yoga classes up there for the tenants or something very passive.
It's amenity for the building.
Okay, and you mentioned stone on the podium. What is the stone?
So we're looking at a Thassos marble or synthetic version of that, something that's going to live and breathe and sort of cultivate itself, but also be very elegant. There's refined details to the edges, chamfering the corners, making sure that pedestrian level experience is not just stucco on concrete, that it's a refined material that wraps that corner.
I think personally, a big fan of Alberto Campo Bay. It's a beautiful project. I noticed the floor-to-floor is much higher at the ground level. What's in the first floor?
So on the first floor is the main lobby space and then a retail fronting Fifth Street. We wanted to have, obviously, a grand entrance, and then in terms of sustainability, taking the height from base flood elevation plus freeboard of 13 NGVD and having enough room in the future, minimum of 15 feet to elevate that space so that in the future, if the ground floor is raised up, we still have about 15 feet for the retail use and for the lobby.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Very nice design. Do we have anybody waiting to speak on this item?
Yes, we have Mr. Wayne Roberts.
Okay, can we advance Mr. Wayne Roberts, who's online? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. I got to say that this developer, I don't get along with developers very well, but he reached out to Sofna, had a Zoom meeting, was very generous and kind, and as developers go, I really like this guy. So I'm lukewarmly supporting his efforts. My only concern really to his effort, as well as commercialization for office space across Miami Beach, is the impact to residential parking from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. during their work hours, because it's often a lot easier and nicer to park on the street than a garage. So how do we limit tenants' rights to parking on residential streets during hours where anybody could park? Is my only question relative to this project.
So this is coming back before you all. You all have the jurisdiction to consider this property because it's a 50,000 square foot rule. So we'll be back to talk to you all about traffic circulation. At that time, we're happy to discuss with you all conditions that would restrict the tenants to make sure they park, because the parking structure is voluminous beneath, and then we're also having some additional above ground parking in the far corner of the property. So we feel we'll be able to handle any demands, but I'll tell you, in this era of Uber and Lyft, as people keep on driving less and less or taking their electric bikes like I did in Mount Sinai Hospital yesterday, I think you're going to find that people's perception of what parking demand is and the reality is going to be wider and wider as the years go.
I happen to have a philosophy that agrees with that, and I have employees that ride their bikes to 41st Street now, and they come from even as far as Brickell to do it, which is, a little more than I want to take on every morning, but I find it fascinating, but I'm a little bit older than them as well.
Are there, just a comment about that, maybe for Tom, are there areas in Miami Beach where it's residential parking permit 24 hours a day, or is it
I
all
don't
the way
believe
between 9
it's
and
24
6?
hours. I believe it's just weekends and evenings.
Correct. That would be the only way to do something like that. I mean, it's kind of out of our jurisdiction.
Yeah. That's not to say that it couldn't be implemented, but it might take a code change to implement something like that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I have questions.
Sure.
It's going to be like my new license plate. I have questions. The building design is beautiful. It really is lovely. I forget what that architectural term is when you have a building that's elevated on those little spindles.
Pilotes.
Say it again?
Pilotes.
Pilotes. Where is the retail space supposed to be? In that elevated space?
Yes, it's on the elevated podium. Again, for floodproofing and an existing foundation, it comes up to 9 NGVD, which is a base flood elevation plus 1 foot, which is per code. So that in that glass bottom facing 5th is the retail space.
And it's imagined to be deep enough and of a sufficient space so that it is true retail and it can't be converted to a bar or something like that?
We're delivering sort of a white box right now, and so there's patio space out front. There's some depth for retail. One portion of it actually goes back almost 45 feet, so it does accommodate retail.
Okay. I have to say I am really happy to see you guys lifting and moving a historic building, and I hope that many other people who have always said, oh, it can't be done, will take note and say, gee, I guess it can be done, because we've been seeing people do it for 150 years with logs, so it can definitely be done. So I'm going to throw a crazy idea out here. Don't throw things back at me. As you are, I'm sure, quite aware, there's a lot of discussion about the need for a new fire station south of 5th, and where it's going to be, and what other historic buildings may or may not get compromised as a result. Has there been any conversation, and if not, can there be some conversation about, as a public benefit, incorporating either a fire station or a substation in your building plans so that it can alleviate some of the pressure on the size and location of the new station that needs to be built?
I'll take that. So thank you, Tanya, for always having the most challenging ideas and questions presented. I appreciate that. I am aware of that issue, and there's a lot of talk about it in the last few months at commission level. These particular developers, I don't think, want to get caught up in that discussion, and there's really not room within the property in order to accommodate the needs of such a large fire station. But I will tell you that as I've been doing the research, looking at the ownerships up and down 5th Street, because there's a 6th Street overlay that's been proposed by Commissioner Minor, so I've been studying that. I will tell you that there are many other owners, particularly on the north side of 5th Street, that might be more receptive to that request. But this project is already baked, and there's really not much room to accommodate what a fire department might need for its fire station.
Even a substation, which is a much smaller, less impactful element to the project?
I don't think there's room for it here on this location.
Okay. Well, let the idea percolate out
Sure.
there.
Sure.
Talk among your developer friends, your property
will.
owner friends. Let's see if we can't find a better solution than what is currently proposed. But it is a beautiful project, and I can tell you, compared to where I work, I would certainly be much happier having sliders and a balcony than my little purple-walled cube. So,
Thank you, Tanya.
Just one follow-up. It is true to Tanya's point that we haven't seen a lot of relocation of these historic structures. I'm from Louisiana, where they're timber frame and they're easy to move around on rollers, but it's a challenge. We haven't seen it done a lot. We've seen a few designs, but to my mind, I haven't actually seen that executed. What goes into that? Have you guys? I'm sure you've anticipated the cost of that. And are we going to see this design again, Michael? It comes back to us.
You'll come back to it. You're right, Nick. It is an incredible challenge to lift a building mostly made of concrete and stucco. And I know we did it on Star Island a few years ago. And basically what has to happen, and Alon knows this much better than I do, but you have to reinforce the openings where the windows and doors were in order to have the rods go in when you lift it up. So those openings have to be incredibly reinforced, or else you just rip through the whole house. So that's the first step. And then once they're reinforced, then how you move it, I think Alon would probably know better than me, but that's the very first step.
Yeah, we've studied obviously a lot of methodologies and the number one hope is to retain the existing building and not damage it when you're moving it. There's a number of methodologies, and once we get into the structure and understand the conditions of it, that adapts. But essentially, in order is pouring a new foundation, getting that ready, assessing and doing a structural report of the house. Obviously, we want to maintain the diaphragm and the infrastructure of the walls. There's two methods depending on how the building is. One would be that you pour the foundation and you sort of do rebar that's waiting for the new house to be moved and almost set on top of it. What they're going to do with the existing house is sort of, depending if they can get under the concrete foundation, they would take two steel beams, jack it up, move it over, set it down on the pad. If we can't get it up, essentially what you do is you prepare those beams, but on top of the concrete slab, and you sort of slice a bit of the bottom of the house off. But you prepare that on the new pad, and then you take that, reinforce it, move it over, and plop it on.
Tough,
right?
But doable.
Look forward
We
to seeing it.
talk with a lot of consultants, and the methodology is sort of being worked out so that we're prepared for every scenario.
Yeah. We'll love to see that if you guys, when the time comes downstream, we'd love to have notice.
Sure.
To the city.
I just think, Tanya, on these kind of things, though, this is a well-funded, well-capitalized developer here. And so a company like that can do this, and Stuart Miller can do it on Star Island. That's not a lot of people can spend that kind of money.
But it
to
also
do
depends on the type of structure, to your point. I mean, I know somebody who got a whole bunch of power jacks and figured it out and had a wood frame house and was able to move his house and do it for not very much money.
And was that a wood frame?
Yeah, as I
wood
just
frame,
said.
Yeah.
But we have plenty of wood frame homes on the beach. There's no question. And there's a very well-known picture, I'm sure you guys have all seen it, of an apartment building in Romania at the turn of the last century being moved. I'd be happy to send it. Michael, you could share it with your colleagues if you haven't seen it, but it's, if they could figure it out how to do it then and there without the building collapsing. There are ways. Where there's a will, there's a way, and it's not always feasible, but it's also not always super expensive. So
we've studied also previously over the years. There's two Henry Holhauser buildings one in North Beach, one here on 16th and Drexel, that we were going to relocate. And we got to the point where we were ready to execute, and the developer backed off from the project. But it's something we've studied vigorously before. It's definitely possible.
So what I'd love to see from this developer, if they'd be willing to share this information with us at some point, is what the cost was to do that, to do the moving. I'm not talking about the cost of construction, but just to do the move of that, because it'd be very interesting for us in data points to get an understanding, because there's a lot of people talking about moving buildings and stuff. I personally don't think it's economically feasible for most people to do that. And I think that, having some data points on this that's a little bit more open would be certainly valuable for our city to learn about, so that we can educate ourselves and educate the population whether this is truly feasible or if it's just pie in the sky dreaming.
Well, again, it depends on the circumstances. I know the Miami Design Preservation League years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, put together a presentation with people who specialize in moving buildings of all different sorts across the country, and I'm sure that could be made easily available as well.
Yeah, I think we need to understand that, Tanya, because again, we could talk about it, but it still comes down to money, feasibility, practicality, and so we need to understand whether or not dreaming is, we could dream about it, but we have to find out whether we can actually pay for it or someone.
Right, and my point is that depending on the circumstances, you can. It's feasible. Sometimes it's not.
Yeah, wood frame, absolutely. Concrete, a lot more difficult.
So if you would be so kind, and whether you put it in a written format or if it's just something communicated to staff, just to talk about.
It would just be great to have that information.
You'll actually see
it's not a condition or anything like that, but just if you could open the kimono
a
little bit to us, it'd be really nice to see this.
You'll actually see it in our narrative provided to the planning board at the next hearing.
Yeah, but your actual costs after.
Sure, we can include that.
If you can communicate that either verbally.
No problem.
And if you feel comfortable in writing, because I know, proprietary sometimes you don't want to necessarily share everything, but if you can just give magnitude numbers and then maybe a summary of what that looks like. I may not be on the board at the time when that happens, but I'm probably sure I won't be, given my term will come to an end and I'm not allowed to re-up. But I would love to have that to the point that has been made by Mark. And then obviously, Tanya's point, there are a lot of folks that are interested in this and just have no place to even have a rough order of magnitude number of what this would look like if they chose to pursue these kind of opportunities. But from my perspective, just hats off to you all for being thoughtful about, trying to envision something that's a little bit beyond just your office building. I love the idea. We had an office building that came before us in Sunset Harbor near where I live. I think Bradley was on that one. And just, looking forward to these pockets of nice Class A office space that will be in the main corridors of the city, off of Alton Road, 5th Street. I think it's going to invigorate 41st Street eventually. I see a lot of sales happening in that area, and I can only imagine that those transfers of property have some other things in mind downstream. So really, I think that this is thoughtful to me to place this building here. I have been looking at that site. There's a bicycle shop that I used to go and work on my bicycle over there. And I've been looking at these footings for a long time, filling up with water. So it would be nice to see this site developed, and you've envisioned something that I think is beautiful for the neighborhood and inviting on that 5th Street corridor as folks come and visit to the beach. And I think it would be good. And I do hear the parking issue. I mean, that is as a tenant in 41st Street, it is an issue with parking. But hopefully, to the point that you made, and coming up with some kind of shared uses along our street corridors, we can tackle these things in time. So thank you for the presentation. I'll be in support of it.
Is there someone from?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is there someone from the public?
One second. I apologize. No, please step to the mic. State your name. And I truly apologize. I did not. Okay.
There are definitely folks in the community who do want to speak about this.
He's been here, so let me take the member from the audience, and I apologize for, again, profusely for overlooking. If you just state your name and where you live, and then you have 3 minutes.
Sure. Thank you. Good morning, members of the Planning Board. My name is Matthew Goltanoff. I reside at 125 Jefferson Avenue. I'm a resident of the neighborhood where this code amendment is proposed. Over the last week, I've spoken with a number of prominent community members, and they all have had a similar message. This building, as proposed, at its height and size, is contextually incompatible and grossly out of scale with our neighborhood. One of the great qualities of Miami Beach is the human scale of the buildings and the wonderful experience that one has as they walk around on these streets. There's a true connection with the built environment. To the immediate south is the low-scale residential core of the South of 5th neighborhood. The only buffer is the very shallow blocks between 4th and 5th Street. the very block which is proposed for the increase in height. Unlike most blocks on South Beach, which have a depth of 400 feet, these blocks are only 200. Now imagine kids during recess at South Point Elementary School, just to the south. Instead today of blue skies, as they look up they will see this building at nearly full lot coverage and a height of nearly 100 feet above grade. Staff's simplistic analysis supporting this increase in height is fatally flawed. The crux of the argument is they simply are allowing office use the same height as residential, hotel, and mixed use within this district. While they mention the difference in height, the analysis fails to mention setback requirements. Residential and mixed use within CPS2 follow the residential performance standard setback requirements. Without getting into details, there are both front and side setback requirements for residential and mixed use within this district, whereas there are 0 setback requirements for office. Naturally, that's one reason why there is a discrepancy in maximum height. It should be worth noting that 2 recent projects along 5th Street were built to the 50-foot maximum height, 803 and 1045 5th Street, while fulfilling setback and parking requirements of their respective uses. Staff also mentions parking pedestals and their impact on interior ceiling heights, yet they ignore the fact that this property has subterranean parking. Also mentioned is the concept of transit-oriented development. Which one is it, parking or TOD? Directly across the street is a planned fixed rail transit station of the county's beach corridor link between Miami and Miami Beach. That project has been awarded and is currently under design by the P3. The reasoning is half-baked, the analysis is flawed, and this proposal is not consistent with the neighboring commercial properties, nor the low-rise, human-scaled residential neighborhood directly to the south. This is the planning board, and you all are professionals and understand how to look at this in a thoughtful, diligent, and objective manner. Ask yourself this. Could I have a few more moments, please?
Absolutely. Please
Thank
finish.
you. Ask yourself this. Can they build today at their allowable 2.0 FAR at 50 feet, bearing in mind base flood plus freeboard, a nearly automatic variance of 3 feet at the top, and of course the very generous height regulation exceptions allowed by code for rooftop amenities and structures? Has there been any data or facts to support the notion that Class A office space needs to have, in this case, 14-foot floor-to-floor ceiling heights, or a 23-foot tall lobby? If extra height is needed, could it be formed as a bonus? How would that be structured? And how many feet? 10 feet, 15, 20, or the requested 25? And please, don't forget about setbacks. These particular questions need to be answered before the code is amended, not after and not part of a design review process. Most importantly, where is the public benefit? By simply granting a 50% increase in height, the property owner is realizing a substantial increase in value. The impression is that the developer is asking for their cake and to eat it too. You'd be doing a disservice to the community by sending this to commission as currently proposed with a favorable recommendation. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. We have some members from the public online.
Yes, we have Daniel Giraldo.
Can we bring him forward?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, and I apologize. I thought I had done this. I looked down left and then I got sidetracked with something else, so I apologize, but please go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Daniel Giraldo with the Miami Design Preservation League. I've been listening attentively to the discussion, and, you know, we are interested in the conversation about possible public benefit as far as the fire station, discussion. And thank you, Tanya, for bringing that up. But then, I was very disappointed again to hear some members of the planning board talk about how our historic buildings cannot become resilient. And I really, think we need to rely on experts. We have an expert testifying today saying that it is possible. And frankly, I think we should be taking advice from experts and not people who were involved in Champlain Tower South, which was a building that didn't even reach its 40th year and was the worst private building collapse in American history. So I'm really tired of hearing certain people say that our community cannot be resilient And I thank the applicant for their expertise in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Who else do we have waiting?
That's it.
I'll give you a second. Just hold 1 second for me, please. That's it? Okay. With that, I'm going to close the opportunity for the public to speak on the item. Recognize Mark Milan.
I'll wait.
You're going to? Okay. All right. Did you have anything else, Michael?
No, I'll wait till you all go ahead, please.
Okay.
Well, actually, we'll talk about Daniel. So,
go ahead.
Daniel's obviously trying to attack me here, it sounds like, but that's okay. But, I deal with data and costs of things. So when Daniel says things can't be made resilient, I do believe things can be made resilient, but when we're talking about moving buildings and raising buildings, I think people have to deal with economics of this. And I'm all for getting the data points from any developer, from land use attorneys like your firm, if you have it, for people who are trying to do this. So I don't appreciate Daniel's comments, but he's entitled to say what he says. But I'm just going with what's. I live in a historic home, and I represent a lot of developers who build modern homes who live in historic homes, and there's an issue with what things cost, and we have to deal with reality of those things, not pie in the sky dreams on what can be done.
No, look, I think that certain scenarios give way to different opportunities. You have a building here that's going to lend itself to, they wouldn't move the structure without being able to do the office building, right? So that provides some metric and opportunity for them to move the building and still be within whatever their return requirements are to be able to complete the task. So, I think your comments were definitely on point. A single family home owner who's trying to do this without some other incentives is a challenging prospect, right? We have had these items come before the board where we've been trying to think of incentives and incentivize homeowners to be able to tap into other sources to be able to do it. So I don't think it's a all-in-one solution. I don't think that what they do in Louisiana is always transferable here, Nick, and vice versa. What we do here may not be transferable everywhere else. So, I'm part of a firm that builds a lot of stick build, but when it comes to Florida, we do a lot of CBS block and a lot of post-tension column and so on and so forth. And so when we translate that back to the corporate office, it's a difference in cost, and it's a difference up until this last year because plywood went through the roof and other wood materials. But anyway, having said that, I think it's all unique, and I'll yield.
Yeah, I would just chime in. I applaud the design in many ways. I see relocating this contributing structure as a public benefit.
Yeah.
They didn't have to do that, but they're going to do that, and I think it's going to be a valuable exercise for everyone in the city to answer these questions. I agree. I don't think the caller is an expert. We're not experts here on the board at relocating buildings, but let's get some data and let's analyze it. And I think that'll be a useful step for the entire city.
All right. So do we have support for the item or denial on the item?
Is there more from the public?
No, we already closed. I remembered this time to close it.
Actually,
Open and close.
I have an office with about 45 employees. I work in the same building as Michael Larkin's firm, downtown Miami, and we have been looking to move to Miami Beach because many of the people who work for us live in Miami Beach, and we have not been able to locate a space because we want to be in an A office building, and we have not been able to locate space. So I applaud this because there is demand. There are businesses here, and if we want to change the dynamic here, we have to, we want to change from low-end motel, low-end hotels. We have to start thinking about office uses in Miami Beach, and to have offices, just like the building I'm in now, which is Southeast Financial Center, we have to have high floor plates. It just needs it. It needs it for the design. It needs it for how the buildings work, and so we're going to have some give and take on this. I understand people don't like height, but it's certainly I'd rather a higher, better use building be there than a lower building that's a worse use for the economy, for our city. So I applaud this, and I think there's a tremendous amount of demand for this kind of product in Miami Beach.
Absolutely. Ms. Bott?
So I think we have all gotten very focused in on this particular project, but at the end of the day, what we're talking about is a change in zoning. And, the devil is in the details. And to the points made by the gentleman from the neighborhood, I'm generally not a huge fan of 50% height increases, but I understand why it makes sense. But I do think that it might also make sense to be a little bit more precise about what can and cannot go into this zoning change in terms of setbacks and ways to minimize the impact of the increased height. And I am clearly not the planning expert as to how to do that precisely, but I would suggest that, as we've seen time and time again, that when it's not specified up front, it becomes the tip of the spear where people can take advantage of it and there are unforeseen consequences. So I would encourage that prior to this getting transmitted to the commission, that a little, some more guidance and sort of bumpers get put into the ordinance so that we can make sure that we don't end up with things that nobody wants to live near.
Mr. Jopi?
Yeah, I was going to ask to Matthew's point about the setbacks, Tom. Could you clarify a little bit? That wasn't my understanding about the setbacks, that there's zero setback for office.
So commercial buildings do have a zero setback. Now, with that said, I think it's important to note a couple of things. Unlike, for instance, the Alton Road office height ordinance that this board transmitted a few months ago in the spring, where we required a minimum 20-foot setback at the rear. Those particular lots on Alton Road abutted directly onto low-scale residential buildings, but I think more importantly, that ordinance affected a number of properties. This particular ordinance is exceedingly limited. Even though the boundaries are a little bit more expansive for all practical purposes, it's probably just going to be this lot. And on this particular development site, they control the properties to the exact south, so they've already got a built-in buffer. The other thing that's important to point out is that this particular project, assuming this zoning ordinance is adopted by the commission, will have to go through two rigorous sets of public hearings, one before the planning board for the 50,000 square foot, and two before the Historic Preservation Board for a certificate of appropriateness. In my view, those are two of the best places to look very closely at the best location for a building. So, for instance, I've seen the proposal. One of the comments I've had to the applicant, and I haven't reviewed their HPB submission or the report yet, but I've expressed some concern about the starkness of the wall along the perimeter. But in terms of the placement of the building on the site, its relationship to the surrounding area, that is oftentimes the best place to address those types of context-sensitive issues, which are germane to this. I wouldn't suggest adding a setback on either side of the building because I think this particular site is very limited. The other thing I would point out with regard to the hotel and residential uses, and the reason we brought this up is that right now you could do a hotel or residential project at this height, and even though the setbacks that are required are a little bit more, there's nothing stopping somebody from asking for setback variances. And depending on the lot and depending on the location, they may very well get that setback variance. So from a practical standpoint, they could build something like this. It would just be a hotel or residential use. The balcony projections might be a little bit different, but the overall height would end up having the same exact result.
And the trunk of the building, you're not going to build it. I would imagine you're not going to build it all the way to the zero lot. You may have the balcony extend to the zero lot, right. But the trunk of the building, that would be kind of what we did yesteryear. And I know we are in a process of building I guess the way I like to say it is development of the future is like development of the past, but more from a planning standpoint. But I imagine that this building is going to have, it's like a natural setback at the trunk of the building.
Yeah, I just want to note that it's 10 feet back, the envelope of the building. Then we have the balconies, terraces cantilevering from that point.
Right.
And then from the south, it's 25 feet really set back from the south. The only thing within the southern setback is the historic home, which is pretty much at the same setback it was originally. So the reason we placed it further north is almost giving ourselves a setback for that taller building, moving it further north away from the neighborhood to the south. So we sort of self-imposed urbanistically a way to gradually work down into that neighborhood. As I mentioned, even the southern balcony near the historic home is pulled back and cut in half so that it's not interfering with that. And another note, if we were to do the 50-foot height with the same building, with the same FAR, it obviously would get squatter and wider. So we would be encroaching further south, almost to the setback there, which is 0 in this scenario. And we've also, the rear setback, which is the alley, is 5 is required. We're at 9 or 10. Yeah, so we've gone further than the setbacks require. Realistically, we tried to be very sensitive to the neighborhood and accommodate those things. And only the balconies touching the property line on the north and the west, having the 10-foot setback from the glazed sort of perimeter of the building, we feel gives a lightness to it, and actually steps away from being a giant glazed wall, right on the property line.
Yeah, I would just add the last cautionary tale is that obviously you heard the excitement from board members, and I think folks are expecting you to really do this public benefit in exchange. So hopefully you will be able to realize that, and it will be a material aspect of your project downstream.
Yep.
All right?
For sure. And I would just add, to Matthew, to the gentleman in the audience, I think the concerns are well heard here. To the degree that makes a difference, I would encourage you to stay engaged with the project. Alberto Campabeza is one of the finest architects in the world. I think you'll be happy with it in the end, but you'll have an opportunity to comment on it in the future. Yeah.
Can I ask a question of Tom?
Yes, absolutely.
So, my whole thing is always the tip of the spear concern. So understanding that this zoning change is effectively really pertinent to this project, and it doesn't seem to, in this moment, have applications for anybody else in this little envelope of space. My concern, because I've seen it happen, is that somebody can say, well, you did this here, therefore I can do it someplace else in the city. So what, guardrails, if you will, would there be to make sure that somebody doesn't say, well, you did it here, therefore I can do it there?
So it's interesting, when this came to land use in October, one of the things that the staff recommended was that the land use committee, or September, it was either September or October, one of the things that we had recommended in the land use staff report is that you extend the boundaries of the height increase for office uses all the way down Fifth Street, because we felt that the north and south sides of Fifth Street were ideal locations for taller height to accommodate office uses, particularly in light of the fact that it's a transit corridor. And the land use committee was pretty clear that no, we don't want it to be all the way down Fifth Street. We want to limit it to this area. I think that in and of itself was a very limiting factor. Any proposal down the line would require a commission referral, and it requires a 5/7 vote of the city commission. So it's a very, very high bar for any future request for a height increase, not just here, but anywhere else. And I think that's probably inherently the biggest safeguard.
But Tanya, I mean, the reality is if we do want these kind of, if we want to change the type of business in the city, we are going to be dealing with these, or the planning board, the commission is going to be dealing with these kind of issues, because the way to design these is with a much higher floor plate than, let's say, any different kind of use. So I understand your concerns. It's going to be block by block or however.
So I have no issue with. In fact, I encourage changing the way our city is perceived and used by people who live here, work here, come to visit. That is clearly paramount to our future success. My concern is that it be handled in this manner of block by block and, opportunity by opportunity rather than a wholesale blanket, well, we did it one place, so therefore automatically it becomes something we can do again, because we are, for such a tiny little city, we are incredibly diverse, and the character of our neighborhoods contributes significantly to why people want to live here or visit here or work here, and I just don't want to lose that.
Just think about the difference, right, between the Fifth Street corridor and 41st Street. 41st Street. There's other corridors that have some commercial. It'll have to be, I applaud that it's not done globally that way, because that way it will just happen.
No, it would
and
be
so
disastrous.
I think the guardrails are sort of community by or area by area, as opposed to just a global say, yes, we can do this, up to this height.
I don't think it's deleterious to the goal to reiterate how important the guardrails are for anybody who might be listening or looking to decisions that get taken here as direction that they might pursue. So
right. But,
I will reiterate them as often as is necessary.
I totally agree with that. But in the context of this project in this area, which is what's before us in this area, it certainly seems like it's reasonable and within the context of this
area.
And
like I said, I was not discussing this project.
I agree. But I don't think we're opening the floodgates here by saying by transmitting this to the commission for the favor. And again, I keep on saying this. If this was sent to us by the commission, and if they keep on sending things like that are unpopular to the community, they're too high, they're too big, too much difference, I think they'll end up being voted out of office. So I think that's another one of the guardrails we have there, Tanya.
I just want to make sure that nobody thinks the floodgates are open. And even if it annoys people that I repeat it often, I'm going to continue to repeat it often.
No, that is why you're here.
That's why I'm here.
You're the gate.
To ask questions and annoy people. That's my job.
And I annoy people by saying it's very difficult to move buildings. I got attacked for that today.
I think you each have your following. I mean, your supporters.
And our detractors, like Mr. Seralto, the personal attack.
Absolutely. No, but look, this is the place to have the discussion and to have these ideas come forward and really, I always tell the mayor when I first met him, when he got in his first term, I told him Miami Beach is a very complete city. And my business engages throughout Florida. And I really do, I've made Miami Beach my home because I really believe that. I've had opportunity to move to Coconut Grove and the city of Miami and other places, but I choose to live here. So I believe it. That's why I serve here. That's why all of you serve.
And you think about Miami Beach as a city, right? I mean, it's this tiny little 7x1 island, right? But yet the different types of businesses, different type of people who live here, different people who work here. It's very different than Coconut Grove or Pinecrest, which is much more homogenized.
Yeah, and all of us up here, we're taking care of this place that we call home, and I think that's what it's about. So. I appreciate all of your comments. We have something on the floor. Do we have any support for the item to move it forward?
I'm going to move this to transmit this with a favorable recommendation to the City Commission.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved by Mark Milan, seconded by Tanya Bott to transmit this to the City Commission with a favorable recommendation. Alex?
Yes. Ms. Bott?
Yes.
Mr. Brantley?
Yes.
Ms. DiPietro?
Yes.
Mr. Gelpi?
Yes.
Mr. Milan?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Congratulations to you guys, and look forward to your opportunity. Let's talking about complete cities. We haven't had David report on the Affordable Housing Committee that he sits on in a while, so I'll reach out, or can we have staff reach out to him just to see if we can have a discussion, maybe. If we look at our calendar for January, February, especially in the North Beach area, because that is another thing that always comes before us, talking about affordable housing in the city of Miami Beach, and that is the area that it seems that residents are asking for affordability to come in, and we had that 808 project in 71st Street, if my memory is correct. I know eventually downstream there are some lots over there in that part of the city that folks have been talking about. So maybe we can get our old our former board member Daniel to join us as well, since he sat on the previous post that David is on now. I think that'd be good for a discussion item. If we can see if we can put that January, February, but just looking forward. So with that, any opposition to closing the meeting? All right, well, the planning board meeting will be adjourned.